guys, welcome back to yet another episode. Today we will be discussing sexual education in school. To make it clear, this is not a sex ed lesson. As much if you want a sex ed lesson,
you should probably ask your health teacher.
And if they're not available, Google is a thing.
Yeah. Google though, not like just stay on safe search though.
Yeah, please.
So, I guess we can kind of start off with like when you start to learn about sex ed, and this is
in
sex
your
ed.
opinion, what is sex ed?
I was about to say, we have to clarify, like, sex ed, does it include the puberty talk, or does it not include the puberty talk?
I feel like puberty is it's the time when you, start...
Sex ed? Or...
when you start, becoming sexual, like a sexual human being, the hormones,
yes.
That stuff happens. So, I guess puberty and, sex ed should go hand in hand. But maybe, this... Well, also, I feel like it depends, where you are situated, and,
where, how, where?
For example, here, I would say, you should have, sex ed by the time you're in 8th grade.
Oh, you mean, based on the laws of the country and everything?
Not just,
or?
Well, laws, yes, but also, what the practices are within the community.
In the community, okay.
Yeah, if you know that there's, an issue with, young students, engaging in sex.
Yeah. Then you should probably be having that talk before and not after.
Yeah.
So there's that with, the whole puberty talk. Personally, I don't know. I think the most common experience, I want to say, is having, the puberty talk first and then the sex talk, maybe puberty, a year apart or something.
Puberty in 6th, 7th grade.
I had my first actual puberty lesson in the 5th grade. It was at an American
There is
school.
no sex ed at Slovak. Not that I'm aware of.
I know that I think in both of my countries there's a mandatory you have to have a sex ed lesson, but is it well made?
You just learn it in biology.
Yeah. So then there's that aspect too. There's the biology aspect of it, and there's the actual
sociocultural.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when do you think we should start learning about? You said depending on the community.
Depending on the community, but
do you have an age?
My parents gave me my parents gave me the sex ed talk quite early.
Oh.
But it wasn't because they just wanted to get ahead of all of it.
Yeah.
So even when I see
done and over with.
When I see it in media Yeah, my parents never kept any information from me when it comes to taboo topics. Which might be a reason why I'm this.
Oh God.
No, but I think I got my sex ed talk this is a thing. Probably 4th or 5th grade.
Damn. No, I don't think I ever got a sex talk from my parents. They were kind of just
But it wasn't it was more so explaining what sex is.
No, I don't think I don't. Maybe I did it. I just don't remember it. That's very possible because I have a really bad memory. But I do know that I had the puberty talk and the thing oh yeah, you're gonna get your period and this is what you have to do and this is what it is.
I saw it with my sister, so I don't know. And also I come from a family of doctors, so it was constantly weird biological stuff, which is being discussed out in the open.
Yeah.
And my grandpa was a gynecologist. So there's
okay, yeah. So there's kind of, I want to say that since there was that some of the stigma.
The stigma was
yeah,
gone.
It's not there anymore. Well, for me all of those kinds of things, I just kind of my sister, I have an older sister, she taught me quite a interesting story. I didn't even know gay people existed until my sister told me. So there's that.
I feel my sister partially no, I remember why I got my sex ed talk so early.
Because you mentioned your sister, and then you're like, I remember that's a little okay.
Because I remember I was like this happened like early on. Like my parents like put it off for a while, but I remember I was in like 6th grade.
Okay, yeah.
Not 6th. I mean 1st grade.
What?
And my sister was like ooh, she was like 11, so she was like that age, and she was like, Barbora, sex. And I'm like, Mom, what is sex? And then she's like, this would keep happening. Yeah. And then, like, by the time I was in, like, 4th or 5th grade, my sister was 15 anyway.
What's the age difference in between
5. Like, 5.5.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought it would be more than that for some reason.
No.
Okay.
She's turning 23. I'm 17.
Because I have 4 years with my sister.
Yeah.
It's kind of 3, but yeah.
Yeah, it's like, ours is technically 6, but it's like
Yeah.
5.
Okay, so... Yeah, so obviously our older siblings do.
The older siblings are huge.
I'm also an older sister, and I know for a fact that I kind of did what Barbora's sister did. I was like, so this is a
sex,
thing.
guys.
This is a thing. I'm not going to, like, ask my brothers to, because they're going to be like, I remember when you did that, and it was terrible.
Yeah.
But yeah, so there's kind of, like, an age when I want to say, like, 11? Yeah. Around 11 is when you start learning, finding out.
I feel like formally it's like around 13, 14 that you're actually like...
Yeah. I know for sure like puberty is probably around 11.
Puberty is around
and then
11.
Sex ed is probably around 13.
14 maybe.
Yeah. And so now we kind of want to talk about like the content.
Yes.
And the context of sex ed. So, first of all, abstinence versus safety.
I feel like... At least the way I've seen it in, like, in the news, when, like, usually sex ed is being discussed, like, especially in the U.S., they're, like, they preach abstinence.
I wouldn't know. But, yeah, sure.
But, like, I guess I'm, like, lucky enough to have had my parents be, like, open enough to be, like, Barbora, once the time comes, please be safe.
I think, I've, like, fortunately, I want to say, I've been in a position where I was, like, privileged enough to go to schools where they were aware that forcing students or telling them don't ever do this, don't do it. Same thing with like smoking and alcohol. It's like don't do it, then chances are they're probably going to do it.
Yeah.
So they always were aware of that fact, and they always said like, okay, so we just want to make you aware of what might happen.
Like even like I was privileged enough to like have the same thing. I remembered, like, the way, I guess, like, maybe this was slightly discouraging, but it was, like, informative. It was just, like, so, like, these are different types of, like, STDs and STIs. Let's learn about them. And then, like, that in a weird way, I feel like, since you it
influences your choices, or...
you're, at least, like, if you're gonna do it, at least you have more of a reason to use protection.
Yeah. So, there's that... Then there's that whole thing, like, do you learn it in biology class, or do you learn it in a more health class?
I feel like health class should be designated for this.
So, here's the thing with me, I had my puberty talk in, like, a health class. It was just, like, a session, really. It wasn't really... But then, for the sex talk at school, anyway, it was more of, like... So we were doing it in biology, and then they had, like, a counselor come in and talk to us and whatnot, and that's kind of how we did it. And then in future years, they realized, oh, maybe we should put more of a focus on this, because they realized in their community that there was something going on.
Yeah.
And so they were like, okay, we're going to have more sessions about this, and we're going to have, like, professionals come in to talk to, like, children and everything. And it was interesting.
I also find it very interesting, like, I know this is for student protection, but this happened at my old school because within the community, there was, like, I don't want to say an issue. Well, it was an issue because it was, like, an older guy, like, pressuring, like, younger middle school girls.
Yeah.
But, like, they became sexually active quite early on. And they were, I don't want to say singled out, but they were, they were taken to the counselor's office to, like, have, like, a sex
talk,
like sex ed talk, like, earlier than others, because, like,
that is singling out, though. That's, like...
It's singling out, but it's also, like...
I understand why, but at the same time, like, if those middle schoolers were, like, sexually active, then chances are their friends knew, other people knew, and it probably would have just benefited everyone to just have, like, a general session.
Because I honestly feel like learning about sex is
It's important.
Yeah.
Like, it's something that needs to happen. Like, and we've all seen the statistics where, like, the more you have, like, the sex ed talk and talk about it openly, the less teenage pregnancies there are.
Yeah,
because people are aware.
Because, like, and you're aware that, like, even if you're on the pill, like,
you have to be careful.
You have to be careful because, like, this can happen. And, like, destigmatizing sex is, like, very important.
Yeah. And another thing we wanted to talk about is how the focus of sex ed.
So, like,
it's very men centered. So, funny story. I have something to explain this. So, when I had my little sex ed in middle school, basically what happened is that we had a counselor who was a woman, and she came and she was like, we're gonna have a little session, girls, come along. And so we were like, okay. And so we had our own little session about, like, what I want to say, like, woman's experience in sex might be. It really wasn't that, like, deep. It was just like, oh yeah, like, you know, you just have to be aware. It was like, I understand why, like, they did that, but it was like the talk kind of like, oh, like, the guy, one of the things that I really remember her saying is like, oh, the guy might not know how to, like, take your bra off or something. And I was just like, okay, this is so informative, thank you so much. Or there was another talk about, what is it, like, what did she say? She was like, oh yeah, oh, it was about boners. It was like, oh yeah, like, a guy might get one and just, like, be aware that they might not, like, be doing it on purpose. It's not really, like, their choice. It's kind of just happens. And I was like, okay. Then I go back to class, and turns out my male peers, classmates, whatever you want to call them, were actually having a revision session for our test that was coming up about, like, sex and reproduction, while we were having our own little session about the woman's experience. And I was like, what? So none of those boys ever went through, like, what a woman might be going through. And, like, we all most of us go through that experience where we have some sort of banana or dildo or something where you'd have to put a condom on it. Like, I get that, it's just a safety precaution. It's like, okay, so you can you do it? And they teach you, like, okay, you do this. They have, like, steps and everything. Have any of the boys ever been shown how a pad works, how a tampon works, how a or a female condom? No, like, it's, or even, like, thankfully my school did teach boys, like, how the pill works.
Yeah, how the pill works.
How the pill works, but that was more of a biology thing than it was, like, and it's not like, it wasn't even, like, you know, like, because usually it'll be, like, you have to teach the boys about, like, like, what happens to, like, hormones and everything. There wasn't any of that. It was just, like, this is what happens inside the woman when this happens.
I also feel like something that's very this talk so far has been very, like, heteronormative, because that's what sex ed is. Sex ed is very heteronormative. But I feel like, from my experience, like, the boys weren't taught, like, the most basic things that are, like, oh, before, like, you engage in, like, intercourse or something, like, wash your hands.
Wash your hands! Like it's basic. It's really basic skills.
But, like, it doesn't click, and I feel like that's something that's, like, worth mentioning.
Put a sign on the door.
It's like, hey, before you're about to trigger someone, please wash your hands.
I'm gonna quack that out. But
wait, you're censoring sex ed.
No, but I have to. Then our video can't go up.
Oh yeah, YouTube.
Our video can't go up then. So no, I will be quacking stuff out, unfortunately. A couple of words already, but that's okay. It's we don't have much of a choice. And these words are things that would you
prefer me to use words like
No, another quack. Okay.
Do you have to quack that out?
Yes.
That's a medical, like,
it's always, like, starred and everything. Hello.
It's a scientific term.
No. Okay, no. But what was I saying? I feel like there's a more scientific way of putting that.
My brain's not working. I wasn't.
No. Okay, so there's always that, like, the basics, and also sex ed is always about, like, intercourse, as in, like, penetrative sex, I want to say.
Yeah, that's when it's... But also, when you say penetrative sex...
Does it include
my quacked out word?
So, okay, I don't know how we're going to explain. Hold on. I think we could say that quacked out word. I think we can say it.
That quacked out word is, you know what?
I think we could say that because that's also like a scientific term. I think we can say that. So obviously, I had my biology teacher from the time was, I want to say, more of an open-minded person, and also he told us like, okay, like, I know some of your parents are going to get mad at me, but I feel like this is important, and I'm also just explaining this because I feel like this is something that you have to know.
As an educator,
So he was like, so there are different types of sex, and he's like, there's oral sex, there's, like, anal sex, and there's penetrative sex, and then he was also like, if you want, I guess there's also groping, but yeah.
Yeah.
So there's those things, though, are not often mentioned or discussed. I don't know about sex ed at our current school.
Yeah, because I wasn't here.
We weren't here for it, but yeah, it's something that I know, like, for my first couple of sex talks, that just wasn't a thing that was mentioned ever. Yeah, I don't know.
I have a cute little segue.
Go for it.
We were discussing how sex ed is very centered around men.
Mm-hmm.
That it's the same in LGBT inclusive sex ed. Like, having LGBT inclusive sex ed is a big thing on its own because, like, that doesn't happen often. But or ever depends. Well, it depends on how, like, you get, I guess.
Yeah.
But I recently found out that, like, well, for when you have LGBT inclusive sex ed, obviously for gay sex, when it, like, comes, like, men loving men, you have that entire condom thing because, like, AIDS epidemic, like, that's an automatic thing. But I've recently learned that there are ways of, like, practicing safe sex, like, for, like, lesbians. And, like, I had to learn that from a social worker. Long story. But basically, apparently, you just cut the condom and, like, you can use it and, like, put it over.
Okay, interesting. We'll put links.
We'll put links.
Put links.
No, or, like, you can put it on your fingers, like, if it's someone, like...
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, and it, like, you would never learn that in school, but, like... And, like, I didn't know till now. Like, last summer.
Literally just found out.
You're welcome.
There we go. So, yeah, there's that whole thing about how sex ed is very... I want to say... It's kind of catered towards ensuring that men are, like, we know all the information about men, but we don't know that much about... We don't even know that much about ourselves. So, that's great. So...
myself, my fallopian tubes.
Yeah. No, we could leave it too. It wasn't anything bad. But yeah. So there's that whole thing, and then it also comes down... I want to say it also comes down to, like, the laws of our country. Is it mandatory? Is it not mandatory? And also the age of consent in the country. Yeah, that's also really important.
Yeah, but I feel like regardless of the, like, even if the age of consent is, like, 18 or above, like, you need to have a sex ed talk.
Yeah.
Like,
and
also, did you have consent as, like, a big part of your sex ed?
So, that was what I was going to say. So, in the earlier talks, I don't think I had anything about it, but we had, like, I don't know if you've seen the video, there's, like, this British audio of, like, a dude saying something about, like, tea, like, if someone asks for tea.
I've seen that. Yeah. I've seen that video, like, 57 times.
So, it's, like, I'll put the link for the tea video down below,
Learn about consent, besties.
So, there's this video about consent that is, like,
it's explained. A metaphor.
Yeah, it's a metaphor.
It's an extended metaphor
for consent through tea, and how, like, unless someone asks for tea or says, like, oh yeah, sure, I want tea, you're not going to hand them a cup of tea.
Or someone's sleeping, you're not gonna, like,
throw tea onto them or anything. Like, that's not something that happens.
Or if they ask for tea, if they say yes, but then, like, oh, actually, I don't want this tea anymore.
You're not gonna force them to drink it most of the time.
Hopefully.
Unless you're a douche. Usually you're not gonna force them.
Unless you're
Oh god. But yeah. So there's that whole thing, like, consent did eventually become a part of the conversation, but it wasn't something that was...
I mean, I was lucky enough like our health class to explore like how consent can be very tricky sometimes,
Mm.
especially at our age, and like external pressure and like internal pressure even, and it's just like
we talked about pressure but not in the context of sex. It was just like pressure in general, peer pressure. So yeah, there are a lot of different I guess I want to say like elements that are important and that should be discussed but are often
Did you have
just
porn as a part of your sex ed?
We didn't at the beginning, but then
we got it in 8th grade.
I got it in 9th grade. 9th grade, yeah. So it was it was just
it was catered, essentially like our porn sex ed was essentially just catered to men, so they would like telling young boys that this is not what sex looks like. That was
kind of what we I don't even know if we had we kind of had that. We had a little metaphor again. I don't know why my school was so obsessed with metaphors.
We had a counselor come in and she like explained.
We didn't have any male counselors actually.
No, we had it was a lady counselor.
Oh, we had they wanted to have like a woman and a man, and we didn't have any male counselors, so they got one of more of like he was like a teacher who was here for a really long time, who knew a lot of the students and everything, so it was fine. And basically it was like what was it, like, just because you've seen a car race before, like Formula 1, that doesn't mean you know how to drive a car. Same thing.
Yeah.
So it was like,
or like you could like extend that and be like, oh, just because like people in like Formula 1 drive really fast, like maybe that's not how you should do it, because like,
or maybe that's probably not how it's going to look like when you drive your little, what is it, like broken down Kia around the
you know the tiny cars, the smart ones.
Yes. Imagine driving. Okay, we're going off topic, but yeah. So that was kind of our little thing about like porn. I don't think that's something that is discussed that often. I don't know if it's discussed here.
I don't know if it's discussed here. I know like we also had like in that little porn talk, she did explain how like porn can be like addictive and like psychologically damaging, which I think was like, at the time I like kind of like brushed it off. I mean, I don't know, I was in 8th grade, I was like, okay. But now that like looking back at it, that was probably like a very insightful thing to like tell young students.
Yeah, I don't know if we really had, like, they probably skimmed over it and I just wasn't paying attention. But yeah, so it was a topic.
Kids don't really pay attention in health class.
Yeah, that's true too. Like, but here's what my experience was that like my school kind of started, the school where I had like the sex ed talk and the puberty talk and all of that stuff, they all started out with kind of having really basic standard lessons, which eventually, and there's also that like whole thing where you play a video for them and whatnot, like, you know, like an educational video. So there's that whole thing, and we all went through that. And then after we went through that, it was just bad timing, really. After we went through that, they realized there was like an issue kind of in the community. And that's when they started increasing all of the talks and sessions. And it just got to a point where a lot of it was overlap, which is understandable.
Yeah.
But a lot of it was overlap, and a lot of it, a lot of the students were kind of like, this doesn't concern me anymore.
Yeah. So
they just kind of ignored it and didn't pay attention or skipped, or it didn't really matter.
I feel like looking back, I feel like I definitely didn't pay attention like all the time, especially if it didn't apply to me. Or sometimes I was being very condescending. I'm like, I know all this, so I didn't pay attention. But I feel like I have now realized the importance of like knowing all of this and not just like what applies to me or like my community or my preferences, but like, because it could help someone out. Yeah, and
I feel like me, since it was in my biology class, I was like, I'm going to pay attention because I need to pass this class because I suck at biology. That's kind of my mindset for everything.
Wow.
But it's not a healthy mindset, guys. Please don't copy me. It's not a good idea. But I'm not encouraging this. But I think I kind of reached a point at some age, or I don't know when, but I was like, wow, like, this is really important and we don't really talk about it. And I also realized how little I knew about childbirth.
Oh yeah.
Because you go through that whole thing where it's like, oh yeah.
We were supposed to watch a child birthing video, but the link didn't work that day, and I was very happy. I
left before they showed that video. I left that school before they did, so didn't get to watch it. But
we can watch it together.
But what I was trying to get at was kind of like we have that kind of basic knowledge, like, oh yeah, a woman gets pregnant, 9 months later she pops a baby out of her either through a C-section or natural childbirth. I put natural in quotations because like often C-sections are criticized when they shouldn't be. And there's also that like whole abortion talk and whatnot.
Like you don't learn that much about
the whole 9 months,
like female reproductive health in general. Like it's all focused on like I guess like don't get pregnant.
Yeah, and everything afterwards, what was it? I think it was like a Tumblr post I saw on Instagram or something that was like listing off all of the things that people probably didn't know about being pregnant and childbirth and all of that. I was reading through it and I was like, oh my god, this is horrible. This is so scary, and no one ever told me this. Like, obviously, as like a teenager right now, as a 17-year-old, I don't see myself having children. But it would have been useful to know as well and be aware. And also, I feel like that kind of, I want to say, like, takes away from all the pain and difficulties that women go through when they are pregnant. Because it's like, they go through all of these hardships and struggles, not even, like, before they give birth to the child. Even afterwards, there are so many, like, consequences on their bodies that we just don't know about. And
like, postpartum depression.
And also, postpartum depression, I didn't even know what that I'd heard of it, but I didn't really know. I just thought it was being depressed because you didn't have a baby inside of you anymore. But it's actually more, at what I've heard now, it's more about, like, because of all of the consequences on your body, because of all of the impacts, like, you just don't feel like yourself anymore, and you blame it all on the baby.
I feel like that's what I'm terrified about.
Yeah, and I feel like both of us, I think, feel like this is going to happen to us. Now that we know that it's a thing, we're like, like, no.
Especially because I know people in my family who've had it.
I don't know. I've never asked. I don't know.
That's the thing. Like, everything was always like laid out on the table for me, which I'm very grateful for.
Yeah, I feel like that's useful. Like, it's
yeah. But I don't know. Like, women's reproductive health is very much like ignored. And now imagine like the intersectionality with like womanhood and like the LGBTQ plus community, like not just lesbians but also like trans women.
Yeah, it's just not there. I never learned anything about trans people ever in school. Everything that I learned was kind of from the media and not even
trans creators, maybe like online.
Yeah, like it was more stuff like that than it was like in school. Like for a really long time I still got confused, like, okay, like trans woman is and then trans man is. I just didn't know. I just didn't have like,
I feel like gender should be a part of the puberty talk.
Yeah, that wasn't something that was there for me. It was something that came like way later, like with the whole.
Also, from what I've heard, like with the whole like gender talk at our school, it is oftentimes like delivered by people who are like misinformed or lacking.
Don't have the right.
There's no ill will. It's just like
So sometimes it isn't. I want to say delivered in the best way possible, and. What was I going to say? I had something to say and I completely forgot. Right. So what I was going to say was that this kind of also, for me, it also comes down to like making sure that there is representation in like the media and it's discussed. It's not taboo because, for example, going back to that whole thing about how I didn't know gay people existed until I was like,
we're not real.
No, but here's the thing, right? I didn't know. Here's the thing. I was reading Percy Jackson. Yeah. Right? And in the first series, it's not that obvious. But in the second series, there's, like, an explicitly named, like, it's like a character who comes up in the first series, but then we find out he's gay later on. He had a crush on Percy Jackson the whole time. He was, like, my favorite character.
I've read it, but I forget.
Nico? The deaf boy. Anyway, so he's gay. I was like, oh, he has a crush on Percy Jackson. I was like, oh, okay, like, cool, I guess, what? And then, like, my sister was like, you're so dumb. You're so dumb. And I was like, oh, and she was like, you know that men can love men, right? And I was like, oh, what? Really? And she was like, yeah. And then I was like, I kind of want to say my eyes opened. Yeah. My eyes opened to, like, there's this whole part of society and history that I just never was aware about. And there's a lot more that I just currently don't know about, but like that's why it's so important to like have it in children's literature. I'm writing an EE about this. Children's literature, the importance of representation in children's literature is so crucial.
Because it normalizes like people's identity. It validates people's identities in a way.
Yeah, I recently watched a video on YouTube of he's a English lit he has like a degree in English literature, I think. Wow. And he was reviewing Meghan Markle's recent release. She released a book. She wrote a book. It's a picture book for children. Oh. And it was heavily criticized before it even came out.
Okay, but that's because
it's Meghan Markle. But it was just heavily it was just heavily criticized before it came out. And then he was reading through it and he was explaining like his take on it and everything. And his conclusion was kind of just like, this is her trying to normalize and expose like different types of fathers and love that fathers may have for their children, and there's metaphors in there's different ways of seeing it, and there's like fathers from all these different cultures and backgrounds and like social statuses, and like a lot of people were kind of just like, Meghan Markle is at it again trying to be like a saint and everything.
Destroy the concept of the nuclear family.
So there's that whole thing, but it was just a really wholesome children's book that was trying to encourage representation, and everyone hated it before they read it. Yeah. So
what I was gonna say is that like, no, it's fine. That representation is very important because it like helps destigmatize certain topics, like even with like sex. Because, like, the more you... Like, it's gonna happen. Whether, like, you like it or not. Like, in communities and stuff. But, like, if it's
The sex talk? Or...
Sex. Sex will happen.
Okay, I was like, what?
But, like, the more you destigmatize it and make it more accessible to, like, different groups...
Yeah.
The safer it's gonna be.
And that's one thing that I guess, like... One thing I really like about... Not all of Europe, but the part that I'm from anyway... Is, we have condom dispensers, like, a lot of them. It's mandatory to have a condom dispenser on all university campuses, and I think it's now also mandatory in high school campuses.
I'm not sure how it is in Slovakia. Yeah. I haven't seen many.
So, that's, like, a whole thing that we have, and I honestly think it's a...
Yeah, I saw that when I went to France for exchange. I think I did buy condoms because I was like, wow, a condom dispenser.
Yeah, and I was surprised because I never, like, as a child, I didn't know what a condom was. Apologies. As a 9-year-old, I didn't know what it was. But when I came back to China and I went to all the, like, convenience stores, and there were just condoms everywhere, like, at the counter.
Condoms are very expensive here.
Really?
Yeah, I feel but they're also really expensive in Europe. Condoms, like...
I've only bought condoms, like, once. And it was to make water balloons, so
why did you make water balloons?
Because we couldn't find balloons, so we just bought condoms. But funny story, yeah.
That's also interesting how like, anti-conception, essentially like all of it is quite inaccessible.
In most countries. Here we live in the city. We have a lot of convenience stores. We have quite.
I mean, like even money wise, because usually like unplanned pregnancies do affect low-income families.
A lot more than they do.
Disproportionately more than, like, high income. Because, well, once you have money, you can afford, like... Well, first of all, you could afford an abortion, you could afford anti-conception. But not many families have that privilege. And just, like, it's interesting that, like, condoms tend to be, like, quite expensive. And, like, so...
How much are condoms? I'm curious.
I don't know. I think in, like, Slovakia, they're, like, €8 for, like, the small pack.
If my Wi-Fi wants to work. Okay, so this is in the US. It costs around $1 each but may be more or less depending on the brand. Blah, 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 blah. This is from Planned Parenthood, by the way. This isn't plagiarism. I cited who I'm taking this from. Okay, so boxes of 3 go for about $2 to $6. Okay. Okay. Should we look at
I feel like 3 condoms and $6, like, that is kind of expensive if you think about it.
Okay, well, that's just because of inflation. Let's not look at that. That's just an econ thing. Oh. Wait, we're looking something up. I keep talking while I find this.
I don't know, and also, like, lube is expensive.
I've never bought lube, I don't know.
I haven't bought lube, but I remember I was, like, in a drugstore, and I was just like, wait, why is it so expensive? Especially, like, imagine if you're, like, teenagers, like, you don't have, like...
You don't have that much money.
You don't have, like, even, like, $10 to spend on condoms sometimes. So I'm thinking, like, I feel like usually in health class, or, like, in general in society, I guess, we're usually taught that, like, guys are irresponsible, so girls just be safer and buy the condoms.
It's always, like, there's always that, even in my experience, like, I've had, adults tell me, like, make sure you always have a condom on you. And I'm like, okay. But I by the way, I don't.
I do.
I don't. I'm
you
so unsafe. Oops. I don't. But, I mean, like, for me, like, it has been that, like, guys are irresponsible, so always be careful. And I can understand that. I do want to be responsible, and I do want to, like, be responsible for my actions, but then again, it's not a one-way thing.
Yeah, of course it's not. Also, interestingly enough, I just remembered that in my health class, though we didn't really talk about, like the use of lube with, like, gay men, our teacher was like, hey, girly pops, like if it's, like, not working that well, like, you can buy lube. And we're like, okay. But I just realized that, like, when you have, like, heteronormative sex ed, like, you learn about, like random things, but, like, I don't know.
Yeah.
But with, like, let's just say sex ed for gay men, like, yes, they'll tell you to, like, wear a condom because of, like, HIV, but they're not gonna tell you anything about, like queer sexual dynamics and, like, all the cleaning necessary for certain sexual acts and, like...
But I feel like that should be just open to everyone. That should be just a general discussion. It shouldn't be like, let's pull the boys aside and...
Like, let's pull all the gay boys.
Let's not do that.
Like, I've never had, like, we never had people, like... within, like, health class, we weren't separated into multiple groups. It was always general, but, like, it should be mentioned for the sake of, like...
Everyone, honestly.
For the sake of everyone, especially young gay men.
Yeah. We didn't have that. I don't think we ever talked about lube in our class. It was always just a, like, this is what it is. I don't know. Yeah.
I feel like that's enough sex talk for today.
Yeah, I think it's important to leave resources available. Even though there aren't that many people who watch this, I feel like it's still useful.
It's like the right thing to do.
Yeah, for whoever wants, needs, is curious.
Yes.
So I will be leaving resources, I guess, down in the description.
Yes.
And so that was our little take on sex ed.
Thank you so much for listening.
Yeah, and we'll see you next time.
Yeah. I think we're not gonna see them.